Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. Today's guest, Jennifer Wolff, licensed clinical social worker, is not just a colleague, but she's also a friend. She has considerable work experience in the corporate crisis management field, where her duties include coordination of national crisis team members and responding in the aftermath of traumatic events. Jennifer serves on several EAP panels and trains statewide and nationally in the areas of active shooter and workplace violence prevention. Her areas of specialty include child-adolescent trauma, corporate and statewide crisis response, collaborative parenting, women's issues, traumatic loss and grief, disaster management, and PTSD trauma recovery. Today, she's going to talk to us about trauma in children. We're going to cover a few objectives, such as identifying trauma-related behaviors of high-risk adolescents. We're going to talk about how primary caretakers may be personally affected when working with high-risk adolescents and children, and we're going to talk about ways to prevent vicarious burnout. I've known Jennifer since 2012, and every time I'm around her, I learn something new. Not just about counseling or about trauma or disaster management, but just about being a human being. Jennifer has a way of meeting you exactly where you are and relating to you on that level, that not only as a peer, but as a friend. I'm really excited to have her on as today's guest, and I hope you find this interview to not only bring you new information and new skills, but maybe a new way to conceptualize working with children who've experienced traumatic events. Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. I am so excited to have Jennifer Wolff, licensed independent social worker, on the show today. Jennifer brings 33 years of admin and clinical experience in the mental health field, working in both the private and public sectors. She currently serves as a senior crisis consultant for national companies, specializing in integrated corporate crisis management. And she serves as a behavioral health specialist for the South Carolina Army and Air National Guard. She has been conducting crisis responses statewide and nationally for 20 years and is the owner of J.J. Wolff Counseling Services. Jennifer has provided the lead role and assisted in various national tragedies, such as the Las Vegas mass shooting, IHOP Nevada shooting, Boston Marathon bombing, Aurora Lafayette theater shooting, Heston, Kansas workplace shooting, and the Charleston church shooting. Within the state of South Carolina, Jennifer is an EAP provider and has served on various speaker panels, including suicide in the workplace and military sexual trauma. She is a board-approved clinical supervisor for LISW licensure and has served as an adjunct instructor, graduate level, College of Social Work, University of South Carolina, and a certified trauma specialist and sponsor, Association of Traumatic Stress Specialists. She has worked extensively in the areas of child-adolescent trauma, PTSD trauma recovery, personal and work-related, women's issues, divorce custody co-parenting, and has trained both nationally and internationally in the areas of corporate crisis management, workplace violence prevention, and active shooter awareness. She also is qualified as an expert witness in the state of South Carolina in the areas of sexual assault, domestic violence, and PTSD and trauma. She and her husband, Rod, have one son who is 16 years old. Jennifer, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Good morning. Thank you for having me, and I'm very honored to be here. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm honored to have you on here. Reading over your bio just has me in awe of what you've done with your career and how many people you have helped. It is a reminder of the work that you do. And so I'm excited to have you on today to talk about this topic. So before we hop into talking about trauma in children, can you share a little bit about how you decided to become a social worker?
Wow. Thank you, Lisa, for that question. As I mull over that, I think it really dated back to childhood. I lived in India when I was 7 to 10. My dad was an engineer and had a project in New Delhi, and we lived in Bombay, which is now Mumbai, for 3 years. And I remember as a child really taking in the cultural differences and being extremely sensitive to the poverty that I was exposed to, and just seeing the different ways that people live. And I think those seeds were planted then, because what stuck out to me was, with so much poverty and as poor as people were from a socioeconomic level, they were content, or they were happy, because meeting people where they are where they are there. And we'll talk more about that. But I was absolutely fascinated with how people tick and the cultural differences, and wanted my compassion. Even as a child, everybody seemed to come to me. My compassion was there. So I was just fortunate, as I progressed, to find a profession that not only could do what I love to do, but could channel my innate abilities of compassion and trying to make someone's world, the best it can be.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about you, that you grew up
Yes.
spent time in India. That's fascinating.
I did. 3 years. Yep.
How old were you at that time?
I was actually 7, and we came back to the United States when I was 10. So 3 years. So had some of my elementary school years there. And again, just such a fascination for how people tick, the different languages, how we interconnect, regardless of what our story is, regardless of what our journey is. And social work per se provides so many different aspects of working with people and groups, and can take so many different shapes and form. That I remember at 15 years old, when my English teacher, I was a sophomore, asked me, you always get that standard question, well, what are you going to be when you grow up? And most 15-year-olds, I have a 17-year-old son, and when I ask him that, and we're doing college tours now, and they ask him that, and he's like, I don't know. I mean, that's your standard. I don't know. I just want to, yeah. But for me at 15, I never wavered. And I said, I'm going to be a counselor. This is what I'm going to do. And I was very directed from a very early age. This is what I want to do. This gives me that plateau, and it mixes what I'm passionate about, find great purpose in, but also what I think I'm cut out to do innately. So,
wow. Yeah. That's cool. I love how you said the word innate a few times. And
yes,
that's something I think a lot of talk therapists would agree with. It's this, you have it in you. You were born with this thing. You've got this gift. People come to you. It's a very common theme.
Absolutely.
So I love hearing that. So tell us, how did you discover the niche of trauma and crisis management? How did you get to this point that this is your expertise?
Well, some level, I was a probation officer with the juvenile justice system, working with kids at a residential children's home, an inpatient psychiatric setting. So to some level, I was always exposed to teenagers, youth that had experienced trauma. And even working in the juvenile justice system, when kids would go out and commit what they do, commit crimes, there was always that background of usually not feeling like anybody really cared about them, or abuse or neglect. And so I was always exposed to some extent, but really got into it when I worked in a group private practice. And I actually worked there for 20 years. And the owner of that group private practice was a trauma guru. I mean, that was his love, his passion, and really taught me the art. He just felt like, because you have to be adaptable, you have to be flexible, you have to be able to think quickly on your feet. He just felt like that would be an area that I would be gifted in. So I credit him for really bringing it to the forefront with me, and started training me on how to do critical incident stress debriefings, also using the psychological first aid model. And I remember during that time going on debriefings with him when people were just exposed to horror, terror, and just watching the art of when all of the puzzle pieces have just been absolutely scattered and they don't know where to turn next, just giving them a grounding and feeling like that connects with me. So I really somewhat fell into it really with that private practice. And then he conditioned me, he taught me the art of being unconventional, not necessarily using a script when you're dealing with someone that is in huge need or huge pain and just going with your natural flow. And I really credit him because a lot of times in school and graduate school, we're told, okay, to go by the steps. And he really taught me how to just bring my best self forward with someone and treat them as the expert and go with their flow. So that led to the first national crisis response, which was Las Vegas, the federal court shooting in 2008. Right. And I was terrified. To be honest, I was like, okay, one other crisis counselor and I'd never done anything of that magnitude. I'd helped people through robberies, assaults, but suddenly Las Vegas, and I was like, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? But being present with people, doesn't matter where they come from, what their journey is, their story is the key. And after I did that, and they actually liked me over in Las Vegas, being from South Carolina, and here I am in a major CNN event, then I said, you know what? I'd really want to stay with this. I really think I can do this. And that has led to just so many stories and what an honor it is to be able to help people. And I know, and meeting you was a blessing, dating back to 2012 when I was able to learn I had worked with service members in a group private practice on the civilian side, but being able to venture over into the military side and realize that PTSD and trauma and crisis is really at the core of everything. And it doesn't matter where people come from. They're impacted differently. And it's critical to be able to address the trauma piece, which is at that core piece. So that's really how I fell into it, was conditioned to do it. And now it has definitely become, I would have never dreamed would have been given the opportunities that I have been given, but it just has opened doors that I would have never dreamed possible. Yeah. And I just go where I can serve.
Yeah. Oh, so. Jennifer, I love hearing your story, and I love learning more about you. And for those, we should share that we've known each other, you said since 2012, is that right? So Jennifer and I have that common career focused niche of working with National Guard and service members, Air and Army. So that's how she and I know each other. And I've learned so much from you over the years. I mean, just watching you in action as we've dealt with, events and crises in our work, just watching you and like kind of following your lead. I'm like, well, what is, so it's really wonderful to have you on the show. Cause I know
Thank you, Lisa.
The objective.
That goes both ways.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, just a love fest over here today.
Absolutely.
So
that goes both ways.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the objectives that we are going to cover today, because
sure,
what you have, you've given me 4 objectives for us to train our listeners on. And the first one, I'm going to read it to our listeners, is identify trauma-related behaviors of high-risk adolescents, children at various developmental stages, and how to respond appropriately. So can you talk about the different types of behaviors that you see at the various developmental stages and ages?
Sure. And I want to break that into 3 areas to try to make it a little bit more tangible. I'm first when I've had such an interest of children and youth, and especially children with their fragility and their vulnerability, and then to realize They're more resilient a lot of times than we are as adults. They know, they tap into that beauty of, well, there's good in everything. And they're not a lot of times cynical because they haven't been exposed to the adult world. So I'm going to break it down into 3 categories. First is children 1 to 6 years of age. A lot of times what you're going to see with those kids, and this is outside of your normal developmental stage, what you're going to see and from a normal context. But when it becomes, it hampers their ability to function and they start showing these behaviors. One is a startled response with when kids are exposed to trauma, that adrenaline is kicked in, that hypervigilance. So, or with abuse. So when they start, you go to hug them and they flinch, or just outside of the ordinary, or loud noises. PTSD is definitely in children, and they hear a loud noise and suddenly they're responding the way that they responded when they were exposed to that particular trauma. So you're going to see those things. Stomach aches, headaches is another one. The physical symptoms, freezing suddenly, the immobility of the body. What you'll see is sometimes kids that can't feel. They'll say they're almost numb or in a shock-like state. Heightened arousal. Trauma comes in through our senses. So you'll see, well, I remember kids will draw, or they'll, I remember what I saw, what I smelled, what I heard. They'll talk about that. What was the scariest part? Another thing that you'll see with kids is cognitive confusion. They are impacted, I think, of the 9/11 deal and how the horror of the planes hitting the towers was played over and over and over and over again. And children in their cognitive processes, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, we're traumatizing every kid in America over and over and over again, because they can't put the context that it's one isolated incident. It's everywhere, and it's outside of my door. I wanted to mention this also. I remember when I did a crisis debriefing, to give an example of that, at a Y camp with a 6-year-old that had drowned, and the child was on the epileptic side. He had epilepsy and he had drowned in that lake. So we went in to help these kids with the grief and the horror of what they saw. And I would love to engage with the audience out there, because many people are going to get this when I ask it. Sitting children around in a circle and talking about, how sad you are and all, was not getting it. What do you think to overcome? What was their number one fear? Now, the 6-year-old drowned while swimming, and swimming was the key. So what those kids in their mind is that every time I go swimming, that's going to happen to me. Not only in my grief. So what we ended up doing, when I talk about being unconventional, I remember when we had them all in a circle, and I looked at my colleague, and they were at the same group private practice. And I said, this isn't getting it. Okay. Because these parents were like, they won't go in the water. And I said, we're going to have to go swimming with these kids and show them. That's what I'm saying, that cognitive confusion. And that's my best example that I can give of that is we had to go swimming, and they had to understand you can go swimming, and that's not necessarily, that's an isolated incident. So there's maybe 1,000 times that this hasn't happened, but it's that one time to you is very real. Children, they don't understand that their world is not safe. You may see, I wanted to mention that one also, bedwetting, regressive behaviors. And usually with kids, I want to get back to a time that it was safe. So you may see them thumb sucking, bed, enuresis, encapresis, all of those things that we have diagnoses for are also a way to cope with trauma. Sleep problems, anxiety, fear, clinging to either attaching, but usually with small children, you will see them very clingy, like separation anxiety. And if it's like, if my friend or my parent was taken from me violently, then you know what? You can leave me too. And so their whole world of that object relations with the caregiver can go, and then they can come back. Suddenly you can go and you're never going to come back. So that's what's behind the clinging. crying, repeated play at the disaster, traumatic event. Usually you see very repetitive play. They'll play it out in their dolls, their puppets, their drawings. That's a lot of times where play therapy is so impactful. So those are the things you'll see in children. In children 7 to 11, that is that prepubescent. Usually they can behave like a younger child. The core developmental issue there is guilt. Okay, something horrible happens and somehow it's my fault. And they're right on the throes of adolescence, so they're developing. You might see anger and aggression in their world. They're worrying about safety, sleep problems, loss of interest in their usual activities, depression, but they don't really show it like maybe a teenager would show it. Clinging also happens there, concentration problems, general worries. You might find just excessive. They're afraid to go to sleep. They're afraid to let you out of their sight. They're afraid to let you go to the bathroom without them being there. Beyond that normal, because at that age, that prepubescent, normal development is they're trying to start separating. Instead, with these kids, you're going to see, don't go out of my sight, or I don't want to deal with anyone, and I'm isolating and I'm alienating myself. Because usually behind that, it's too painful to be close to anybody. So I'm just going to go be in my own world because you don't understand my world. At some level, I want to give the dialogue that's going on behind what you're seeing. There's fear and there's a preoccupation with safety and danger. These kids at that age, they may be checking everything. I've worked with kids that will leave every light on in the house. I've worked with kids that will check the car. They'll be afraid to go in Walmart. They're checking everything, their closet, over and over. It's a repetitive. So you're going to see that. And then I want to move into adolescents. Boy, anybody out there that's worked with them, or there's a parent. I'm a parent of a 17-year. He's 17 now. Just turned 17. But that's a challenging age anyway, because we got that thing called hormones going on. And so you're going to see that increased withdrawal can be a very prevalent, or they're acting out like crazy. And at that age, I've got it going on. I've got my own beliefs. I don't have to do what you say. You might see increased alcohol and drug usage. You might see risk-taking behavior, major sexual acting out, drug use. Kids that are hurting at that age, they may do some really, doesn't give anybody comfort, especially there, because you have of trying to keep them, that old Pink song. I always use this with teenagers. Pink, the singer, they're going to know her. And she did this beautiful song called I'm a Hazard to Myself. And so they are truly a hazard to themselves. And there's no rational basis. It's just, they're trying to make meaning of meaninglessness and sense out of senselessness. So you're going to see that sort of sense of the future. Kids that suddenly were going to go to college, or I was planning this, suddenly I don't have any goals, because behind that, I don't know if I have the next minute. I thought I had the next minute, but that minute changed my whole world. So they don't plan changing plans. Suddenly they're not going to college, or I don't know if I'm going to be around. They'll say things like that. And you also at this age, and even in middle school, and even we're seeing it sadly in elementary school age, you have to look at the suicidal. This is so painful. This is so overwhelming. Maybe it's better if I wouldn't be here. You'll hear them say that, but when they have an act, you have to explore that. And you have to understand it's not just in the teen years. We're seeing it as very young children taking their life or saying things like that. We could do a whole other podcast on how kids are growing up too fast and how their cognitive processes cannot keep up. And that's why I think we're seeing this from how exposed they are at very younger years. But let me move back to the teenagers. Concentration problems, school performance, they start failing, or they're overachievers. Now, think of the word balance, and they're out of balance. They're either I'm failing everything, or you see perfectionism. Like you have the adolescent, and it's not solely females. I think they get the bad rap stereotypically that they're all the perfectionists, but suddenly a kid gets a 99 on an exam, and that's horrible. All they can see is I screwed it up. That I didn't get 100. So you see that perfectionism kicking in. And that's with males too. So you can see that. It's usually temporary, or they just stop going. Truancy, I'm just not going. General worries happen there. Anxiety, suicide really peaks at that age by nature. So you really need to be alert to that, especially if it's a trauma that involves the loss of a loved one. They may say things like, I'm going to go join my dad. And I'll share this briefly. I had a young man who was 16 whose father was murdered. And the father was a podiatrist. The first time I met him, he came to see me when I was in the group private practice. He looked me in the eye. He was very close to his father. And he said, no matter what you say to me, no matter what you do, I just want to go be with my dad. And I'm going to go be with my dad. Now, you do all the sad ending of this story, and I'm going to give one after I was no longer working with him, because you do all the suicide prevention. And I want to say that no matter sometimes everything you do, people are where they are. But this same young man proceeded to shoot himself. It was 2 years later. I was very impacted by that. I've had a couple of because we all risk that when we're working with that type of level of human pain. I remember just saying, I'm done. I can't do this. We all have those moments of deep pain ourselves, but then it's kind of like, you're going to be tapped on the shoulder. You're going to get back out there. You have to give yourself time to decompress and work through that. But that young man in particular was in so much pain that he was going to do it sooner or later. And it was interesting. His older sister, here's how light is always brought in when there is tremendous pain and dark. His older sister actually came to see me later and had gone on and had done things and hit to not to focus on the tragedy. She had lost her father to murder and her brother to suicide. And in her courageous sense of self, she actually was going out there and helping survivors of trauma herself. And she came to see me just for support. But that was the light that came in my door that, okay, if she can go on with that, then it's almost selfish to think, oh, I don't have to still give of myself, because you do. So anyway, the last thing I wanted to mention, I wanted to give some examples, is sleep problems are usually all through this. And you might see in younger children, suddenly they want to sleep with you. With the teenagers, they're either sleeping too much, and that's all they want to do is sleep. And then they talk about, I'm tired all the time, or they're not sleeping and they're up all night. And this goes beyond something that might be chemical, because we know that bipolar or manic may set in during those latter years, but this is trauma based. So hopefully I've given you an overview of those three. And I just wanted to mention also with adolescents, I think we've talked about, they may also want revenge and talk about getting back at someone, or I'm going to, and we know sadly in the day and age that we live in, kids can get a hold of everything. And usually there are pre-warning signs. I think about these school shootings, which are terrifying all of us. And they said what they were going to do. So if you see something, say something. That's very preventative. Depression, I think I've changes, rebellious behavior, or you see appetite loss. I do want to mention that one. Either they start gaining weight or they're not eating. And that's all. And really at the core of all of it, what kids and adolescents, the core belief systems, I want to give 4, is another disaster will happen. Someone will die. That's at the core of their thinking. They will be separated from the rest of their family, and they will be left behind all alone. Those are really the core when they have anxiety and fear. And those are, as a clinician, it's always important to explore The behavior is the symptom. The behavior is the fallout. The behavior that you're seeing is connected to whatever that core belief system is and that unmet need. I've used that over and over and over again. You got to find the unmet need and don't just get stuck at what you're seeing at the surface. What does that behavior represent for that kid? So hopefully that answers and gives a strong overview of those different stages.
Yes, definitely, for sure. Thank you for going over all of that, all the different stages. I just want to clarify, the third stage, that's 12 to, is it 18 or is it 12 plus?
The third stage, yes, you've got children 1 to 6, those early years. Then you've got that prepubescent, the latency, 7 to 11. And then you've got 12 to 18, which is adolescence into young adulthood.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I had that correct. This episode of The Therapy Show is sponsored by my favorite fitness apparel, Zaya Active. I recently discovered Zaya Active when I went looking for high quality and premium workout clothes. Just like those luxury store and catalog brands, yet I wanted a budget-friendlier price tag. I love this brand because, number one, I live a very active lifestyle. I hit the gym about 5 days a week. Plus, I love to go for runs and long walks, which I consider to be my very important self-care and podcast listening time. Plus, the endorphins I get from my workouts keep me in my happy mental space. The clothes stay put. I'm not constantly pulling on my leggings or tugging on my sports bras, and they accentuate me in all the right places. And number two, when I work from home, I love to be comfortable in leggings, also known as yoga pants, and a tank top. Plus, I can transition to running out the door to pick up our girls or run errands while still looking put together in my athleisure styles. My favorite workout leggings are the light and tights, and my favorite everyday wear are the everywhere pants. I literally wear them everywhere, every day. I can even wear them to business meetings or client consultations. I can dress them up or down easily. Want to learn more? Head over to lisamustard.com and click on the Activewear page. You can learn all about Zaya Active, the mission, the clothes, and see if they are a fit for you and your active life. From weight training to running to Zumba to yoga to CrossFit to bar to walking to tennis, Zaya Active has you covered. And don't forget about the active men in your life. They have an amazing men's line, plus clothes for active kids too. That's Zaya like papaya active. So see my site for all the details. So I think I'd like to transition, that was just great, but I'd like to transition into how to respond appropriately to these different developmental stages. And I know that could be a really big discussion. So if you can give us some of the overall ways that you approach each stage and what your goal is.
Sure. Well, I think definitely with older children, let's start with the younger children. Your number one goal with those kids is to make their world safe. The whole core of safety, to give them, you don't want to go into detail at that age. You want to keep it age appropriate, but really younger children, all they need to know is that you're going to be there and that their world is safe. I frequently, and I've said this, and I'll say it, if I say it once, the better we are as adults, the better we are as parents, the better our kids are going to be. We may be absolutely unraveling or, oh my gosh, what do I say? I'm terrified myself. But you have got to present that calm, confident, especially as a parent, because, you're their greatest teacher. You're there. So really with younger children, all you want to do is give them outlets, play, drawings, to express their feelings, to let them know that every feeling is okay, to put it into cognitive perspective with those kids, let them know that the danger isn't every day. Be very careful. Children are very literal in their thinking. So at that age, be very careful of what they're exposed to as far as supervise what they're seeing on social media, the news. We know that the news because it sells, sadly. They sensationalize trauma, if you think about it. So really want to put it in cognitive perspective with them. And kids, you can't talk them through it. You have to show them. So a lot of the other thing I wanted to mention at that age, a lot of TLC, a lot of just, you're going to be okay, because they're just looking for security. They don't totally understand what's going on, but they're just looking for security. Definitely with the latency age, the main thing is to teach them how to put it in perspective, help them express all emotions, but usually at that age, there's some level of it's my fault. So it's, again, I feel this guilt. And kids at that age, a counselor said this to me once, and I've researched it, and it's true, is that whatever you tell kids until the age of about 13, they will believe. So I'm not a fan of secrets. I'm not a fan of making up stories to help ourselves feel better. Or, for example, if you tell an 8-year-old that trusts you, hey, there's a boogeyman outside your window. I mean, sometimes people do that because as social workers, we have to put on the social worker face. But sometimes what parents say to their children, or and you're just like, you didn't really say that. You're thinking that's your bubble, like Dad would, the comic, but you can't say it. But if you, and sometimes you're like, oh, do I beat my head against the wall now or later?
Right.
Yeah, because it's like, you didn't really say that because you don't understand. Your kid just took that to the bank. Okay, whatever you told them. So do not be very factual and give them time to grieve. Don't make up. You got it. Like if the parents get a sudden divorce or tragedy, that kid's going to think, and sometimes sadly, what do parents say? Well, it's your fault. If you hadn't been good enough, that is so destructive. Kids at that age will take it to their soul until at 13 they figure out that wasn't true. I also wanted to add, with younger children and even the prepubescent, allow them opportunities to regress as necessary. So it's not unusual, and I've seen this. If you have a 10-year-old that is suddenly having accidents, or they're starting to suck their thumb, or they don't take them to their pediatrician. What's wrong with them physically? It's usually, yes, you can do that, get them medically checked out, but be very aware to not shame them for anything that they do. And I only say that, I know as social workers, we would never do that, but in helping your clients, I've just been exposed to the 10-year-old that suddenly they're wedding and they're told to, you need to grow up, or you're a big boy. Why is this happening? And what he's really doing is, I'm regressing because you know what? When I was a little baby, I didn't have to deal with all this. So they actually physiologically can go back to regressive behaviors. Allow that opportunity. And I always say, let the kid do it until they don't need to do it anymore. That's their way of working through it. Now, whatever that is, you have to teach them. You can do some things in private. You can do some things in public. You still have that teachable moment, but that's their way of coping. And then again, help them clear up the misconceptions. And with the middle school, the prepubescent, you can also give them a stand. Those kids always like to take a stand on everything. So you can story tell. You can say, well, if we had this situation, then let's tell a story about it. And what do you want your part to be in the story? And what do you want? How do you want to take charge of it? Or what could you, they really are into, I want to have myself heard. So how can you use that? Then in the adolescent years, wow, give them outlets that that they can survive. So you might see in those kids some self-mutilating behaviors, and I always say what we used to do is you'd end up in a psych hospital as soon as that happened. Now you have to give healthier alternatives. So with teenagers, identify the behavior, but not just correct the behavior. Give them a healthier alternative. Like, okay, self-mutilating, instead of, okay, you're going to go to a psych hospital because you're suicidal. That's not what that behavior means. We're going to find a way. It's addictive. So we're going to find another option that you can get the same euphoric feeling, but it's not going to hurt your body. So really giving different options. With teenagers also the same thing. You can use so many mediums. I've used, like, I have teenagers that are rappers, okay, and they make a rap song up about the trauma, and then in the rap song, and be very open to whatever form it takes. Like, I'm a big proponent that meet people where they are when they're there, and if it comes out in distasteful language, or if that's how what they need to do. So with poetry, music, all of those things help them put it into context. And also with teenagers, they usually want to take care of things. They want to, I want to take care and I want to get revenge. And then you have to help them see, well, your mom needs you. Or how is that really? I know you're hurting. I know this is devastating, but really, how is that going to resolve? What's your mom going to do then? What's your little brother going to do then? Reality with those kids, because they understand that. They understand reality. They understand a lot of mumbo jumbo theoretical, theories per se, but they will understand when you put it as, how does it affect moi? Kids at that age, 12 to 18, it's all about moi and how does it affect me? So hopefully that answers, Lisa.
Oh, Jen, that was incredible. I'm taking notes over here, writing things down. And, it's being a mom and of a 10-year-old, so much of what you're saying, it's like there's a spectrum of children's emotions and behaviors. And, I'm listening to what you're saying and I'm going, oh my gosh, has my kid been exposed to trauma? Because man, she does a lot of these things, but then I have to remember that a lot of what you're talking about is normal.
Yes.
Developmentally appropriate. However, when it becomes a problem to their functioning and becomes a problem because not every kid that experiences trauma is going to, express what you've talked about. And I think it's important as clinicians and also as parents and to know, like, kids go through this stuff a lot anyway.
Exactly.
It's just like, okay, what's normal for your child versus this kind of reaction. So, and a lot of people that are listening to the show are not clinicians, but they want this information. So just because your child might be exhibiting some of these things Jennifer's referring to does not mean that they have been exposed. A lot of this is normal, right?
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I just wanted to mention, as we talked about regressive behavior, but it sometimes, just to reiterate, if you do hear active threats being made, really explore that. Mm-hmm. And then make the school, like, you want to meet kids because you want to bring up the topic, but in a general way. Like, for example, schools are doing active shooter training now. They're exposed. Your kid is exposed as early as elementary. We didn't live in a world like that. Our crisis was, when I was growing up, our crisis was somebody got in a fight behind the band building. But now, now they're getting run, hide, fight, active. So with my teenager, because what kids care about, and I want to mention this one also, is routine intact. Like, they're impacted if they're exposed, but it's kind of like, listen, okay, especially with teenagers, am I going to get to hang out with my girlfriend at that Friday night football game? Really? Right. Or how is this going to, keep it? Am I going to still get to go dance? Can I hang out with can I play dolls with my friend? What they really care about is keep that routine as normal as possible. Their sleep, their eat, everything you've done. When they come in the world and you read all the books that says, what to expect and feed, eat, sleep, and you do all that as a new mama and you're trying to do it like by the book. And then you realize the little being regulates themselves and they say when I'm going to feed, and you realize, okay, the kids internally do that and they want to maintain that. That gives them a sense of control. It gives them, so again, keep that intact, let the school know and work with them collaboratively, share with them your knowledge base and help your clients do that as well. That, hey, this is what's going on. And just to be aware, just encourage them. And I think I give them choices because that gives them a sense of control. Don't, especially with teenagers, I may keep it general, like, wow, that school, we watch the news together. But Jamie, my 17-year-old, he'll frequently say, and this is funny, and we'll get into self-care as a clinician, he will say to me, because, when you're exposed the way we are, we see usually what 90% of the population has not as social workers. I mean, and if somebody says, well, they had a background check, and you're thinking, and out there in social work land, you can relate to this, that it's kind of like, yeah, so what? That pedophile had a social work check, a background check too. My son, because I'm very protective, that's how I realize it has really impacted me, is I need to know the ins and outs and where you're going and all. And he will frequently say, Mom, because I've talked about secondary PTSD, and he'll say, Mom, is that your secondary PTSD kicking in again? And, so it does impact us as adults. And all the things that I'm talking about, the change in the core belief systems, how you see the world, the 3 areas that are impacted the most are trust, safety, and predictability. We are impacted as well in the same way.
Okay, that was great. I have so many thoughts running through my head. What you just shared, it was awesome, Jen. That was so helpful. Just kind of going over what you would do and how you would approach it. And I think at the core of this is, if you're a new therapist and this is an area that you want to get into, what would you recommend for the new therapist out there who's newly licensed, who said, I really would love to get into this work? What would you have them do?
I'm a certified trauma specialist. So through the Association of Traumatic Stress Specialists, it's an international organization. It's the ATSS website. They have some great materials there on how to do crisis work, the critical incident stress debriefing versus psychological first aid. Learn the world. Learn, you want to do this, but I always advise students, make sure you have the innate gifts to do this kind of work. I will be the first to tell you, it is intense at times. You have to be able to think at a moment's notice. You have to sometimes be able to go at a moment's notice. So it's not a 9 to 5. It's not, people don't pick and choose when they're going to go into crisis. It can be grueling. It can be intense. So talk to other people that are in the area that are doing this kind of work. I want to throw out another name, David Baldwin, Trauma. He has a website. He has some great articles to talk about trauma and what it really means, because it does. It's not, I have a crisis management team and we talk about this. It's not just being a mental health practitioner. It's not like somebody makes an appointment to see you, you do the therapy, and you have to be adaptable. You have to be flexible. Sometimes it does interfere with your family life. On the other side, not so much now, but I've missed my son's birthday, one of them, and it killed me. But I was called to a national crisis response and I had to go, and I said, never again. So you have to prioritize. You don't realize that part of it. So if you're going to get into it, you have to balance, but you have to commit. Like, you can't go into somebody, this is at a very intense level. So you can't go into somebody's world. You become their lifeline. You really do. You can't fix it, but you are their lifeline. If you think about, I don't want to be someone's lifeline, that is too heavy for me. I don't want to do that. Trauma crisis work may not be for you, and that's fine. That's great, because you really do become that. You do. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
If you guys could see me, I'm over here nodding my head, because just by the nature of, I'm thinking to experiences over the past couple of years that we've had in our role with the military, how I really didn't realize a lot of this until I got into it. Yes. And it really shocked me. And I had to take the necessary I had to set boundaries for what I was willing to do and what I wasn't at certain points, which I think is a really nice way to kind of segue into talking about how do you prevent burnout when you are in this field?
Good question. And I will tell you, I'm now 55. I've been doing this at some level since I was 22. I do it much better now than I used to. When you're so inundated early on, let's say what not to do so you know what to do. Mm-hmm. Don't protect your boundaries. You're not off the clock at 5, but you need to be off the clock at 5. Like first that, because you're taking in so much human pain. So be off, say I'm off, decompress, find your outlets, your support systems. I do yoga. I do hot yoga and I do it at 5 a.m. All right. I'm one of those. And Lisa, I know you do as well. You work out early. Well, the whole thing about working out early, and people look at me like, no, you don't get up at 4:30. Yes, I do. Well, you got to understand the likelihood is your phone's not going to ring before 6. Okay. So you carve out that time where it's just yours. And whether that's early morning, whether that's at night, there has to be that time. So definitely I throw the word balance. Be aware. Maslow said it beautifully. If we're not eating, we're not sleeping, then we're not functioning. So if I'm not eating or I'm playing that over and over, be aware of that. Your body is your greatest teacher. I will say that once, I'll say it 100 times. Your body will tell you what it needs when it needs it. And we all have triggers. We all have our own story. We all have our own journey. And if anything I would say that I know now at 55 that I didn't know at 22, because when you're first starting out, you want to show everybody that you have got it going on and there is nothing you can't handle and you can be all to all, and then you get that client. I'll share a small story. I remember I had a journey getting my son here. I was 38 when I had him. I had pregnancy losses before that. And I remember right after one of those pregnancy losses, it was 5. So I know the journey with that. And I know the pain. And that's why I have who has a baby at 39? I do, 38, because I got him here, right? But I remember I went right back to that group private practice. I didn't give myself time to heal from that, jump right into it. And the first case that came in my door, this first situation, was a mother whose young child had been murdered. And I remember someone coming to me, a clinician, and saying they knew what I'd just been through. And they said, do you think you really need to, Jennifer, let's really look at this. Do you really need to take that one on? I was like, I got this. This isn't about me. It's about them. No, at some level, I had no business. I'll be honest, because dealing with the intensity of that, I think it helped me heal and it helped me grieve. But I also took its toll on my body. I got physically sick at night because, understand, I just lost babies and then one had just been killed. So be aware of your own triggers. And as a crisis counselor, I know I'm pretty much a realist. I throw things out there, but you can identify with that. And as a social worker, if you haven't already seen situations like that, sadly, you will. So be aware of your own limitations. And it is completely fine to refer out. It is completely fine to say, I can't not today. I can't do this today because of what you're going through. Self-care. When I say decompress, do things you enjoy. When I say decompress, go do something that you love doing. And because, believe you me, have fun, play. It will all be there for you when you come back. And when you have people that are in pain, I always tell people that they're going to suck the life energy out of you if you let them. And we know that. Lisa,
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about just recently, about 2 weeks ago, we were having a conversation. And if they know you're a counselor or a social worker, it's like we're wearing a sign. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's everybody there. You're going to say, good morning. Hey,
Right.
how you doing? How's it going? Want some coffee, whatever. And they're going to say, hey, Lisa. Hey, Jennifer. Let me tell you about, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly it's like, and you're going to have, when you're like, oh, not another problem. I don't care. We all get there. It doesn't mean you're insensitive. It means you need a break, and your body is telling you that. So triggers, self-care, take regular breaks, especially with intensity, refer out when you need to, seek support from your listeners. Hey, I just need to talk about this. And usually we go to each other because nobody understands like we do, because we're all living it together. So hopefully that answers.
Oh, completely. And that's so funny that you bring that up about the conversation we had a couple weeks ago. I feel so close to the other, counselors where we work, because it's almost like we can give each other like these eyes, like the signals, and we all just get it. And we don't do it with the intention of any type of, bad ill or bad intention. It's more of I get it. I know exactly what you're feeling right now. I understand you. And sometimes that's all you need from your colleague, is just like that wink or that nod. Like, I know what's going on right now, because of the nature of what we do and where we are. I don't know. It takes, I think sometimes people from the outside looking in were like, they wouldn't get it, but of course you wouldn't, because you're not in it. So I'm just, and right now I'm just kind of babbling, but you get me. Like, Jen, you totally, like, you totally get me.
We get each other.
We do. And I hope everybody out there listening has a therapist friend in their life that, understands them and the work that they do and the niche that they work in.
Absolutely.
Because there's all types of niches out there, and it's fascinating what counselors are good at and what their expertise lies in. And I'm just always interested in what people do and how they get to where they are and the story behind it. So, it's fun to have you on the show, and your knowledge and your wisdom is just like blowing me away over here. So thank you,
Lisa.
Yeah, thank you again. Before we end the interview, could you share a little bit about how primary caretakers may be personally affected when working with high-risk adolescents and children? Not so much therapists, but the primary caretaker for these kids.
Yes. Well, they definitely, I throw this out, is they may have very unrealistic expectations of themselves and others. In other words, none of us are broken. You can't fix this. I want to emphasize that so much, that when in the younger years, and my trauma guru teacher really taught me this is as good as it can get for this person. You feel that tremendous, if they're failing, I'm failing. It's an enmeshment sometimes when you're the primary caretaker, in that I can't get away from it. And then you feel guilty because you want to get away from it. Mm-hmm. It's as good as it can get. There's that difference between caring for people and taking care of them. There's that difference between loving and caring and being enmeshed. And I think as primary caretakers, you have to take those breaks, because you feel my whole world is them. And it can't be. You have to be bound. And I think as social workers and primary caretakers, the number one thing that I would say is reevaluate how you spend your energy, monitor your own self-talk. I'm not doing well if someone's struggling, because you're told in the books and the training that you have this technique and that's supposed to work for that person, and just give them that and it's all going to be okay. And life doesn't work that way. It's a process. Remember, and I'll throw this, work in process, work in progress, work in process. In other words, if it happened 5 times yesterday and it only happened 4 today, hey, we're moving in the right direction. And then the next day, you know what? It might be a not today day. It may be nothing's working, and that's not my fault. It's just the ebb and the flow. I was dealing with a couple yesterday whose daughter was murdered 2 months ago. And the father said something so beautiful. He said, this whole thing, because let's mention grief also and loss. You have to do that piece that they have to grieve before they can do anything else. So you have to give outlets for that. But this father said, you read the grief stages, you read this, you read that. Really, Jennifer, it's just moment by moment. And I said, you're right. In that moment. So it's moments by moment for you as well. It's, I'm going to take this moment. And then when it's your body's talking to you as a primary caretaker, where are your outlets? Where are your support system? Use them, especially with high risk. People use respite if they have foster kids away. Use it. Sometimes I've seen people that say, no, I've got to have that kid on. No, you love that kid, but you need a break from that kid. Right. You need a break from people sometimes, no matter how much you love them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so wise. I love that. And I just know that you're helping so many people move through so much. And this has been such an incredible, interview and education. I'm so, so grateful that you.
Thank you for having me. This is an honor for me to do this. Thank you.
Well, I've known you many years, and it's always an honor to hear you talk and to hear how you do your work. And I'm proud to know you, and I'm grateful to have you in my life. Yeah, no, and I hope everybody listening.
Here, Lisa.
Well, thank you. I want to encourage everybody that where can they find you if they want to learn more about you?
Sure. I have a website, jjwolfcounselingservices.com. They can utilize that. I have an email. It's info@jjwolfcounselingservices.com. Thank you for asking. And I have my direct, I have 803-917-9948. I would ask I usually respond more effectively by emails. So if you do that email, or just because my phone's ringing all the time, it's just better. I can respond right back. Contact me. If I can offer something to you, I want to, but my website has a listing and that email comes right to me. Believe you me, right. It pops up. So I know exactly when someone has.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate, Jennifer is probably one of the most tech savvy clinicians I know. She's logged in, she's hooked up. And mainly because of the work that you do.
Yes.
You want to be available for your work and your contractors when they need you. So I know that is a big part of your day. So do you do any type of supervision when it comes to trauma?
Yes. I
okay.
do. I'm a licensed independent social worker, clinical supervisor. I also can provide case consultation. I'm a consultant nationally with threat assessments for workplace violence. And then I also just meet with people sometimes when I have a young girl that wants to go into the trauma field and they said, hey, I just want to pick your brain. So I do that. I would also add this. I just thought about, we live in a technologically savvy world now, and the telemental health piece, I cannot emphasize enough, is that we're going to work differently in the future. We're already working differently. In other words, get privy to video counseling because sometimes people say, well, video counseling, you don't get the relationship. It's not appropriate for all situations, but the research shows, and I will put the plug in for this, that there's no real difference when it's coaching someone, supporting someone, and it adds to that convenience. It's going to be the wave of the future. I have a lot of millennial age clients. They're not going to come to an office and talk to a counselor, but they'll talk to me over the computer. Yeah, cool. Right. I'll talk to my counselor. Oh, she's kind of cool. I can see her over my iPad. Yeah, they like that. So definitely get well versed in how therapy is, in counseling and support. There's many different ways of providing it now.
Yeah. Okay.
Nationally, I usually provide it all through telemental health or telephonic. It is very rare now that I actually have to go, and that I like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you do a lot of your crisis intervention and treatment
I do. On the national standpoint, sometimes I still have to go if there's like a mass shooting or there's something major, but not like I used to, because now I get to manage the crisis team nationally. So if there's something in California, I don't have to pack my bags. I did that a lot of years, but like I said, the fallout was missing my son's birthday. So there's balance in that. And to be honest, I like my family. I like my family life now. I really, I don't want to go flying over to New York because I want to send someone that's in New York to that. So yeah, but you have to work up to that. It's hard work. It's hard work. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. Well, thank you again so much for being on the show today. I am going to put all of your information in the show notes. So
wonderful.
For those of you guys listening, thank you again for being here. Check the show notes. Come back to make sure this is, approved for 1 hour of CEUs. We're gonna submit this course, and hopefully you can come back and take the self-study and get the certificate of completion and get 1 hour of self-study. So Jen, thank you again so much, and I look forward to the next episode that I'm bringing you back. We're gonna do something else. This is really fun.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. Glad to do it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for listening to The Therapy Show. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine. Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content. And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the podcast. Thank you.